Hi, and welcome back to Continual Fandom. Tonight, we're going to be talking about some of the masters of horror and suspense. None other than Hitchcock, Ed Wood, and maybe some of our other personal favorites from the golden era of film. So before we dive in too far tonight, I'm your host, Jim Nettles. Let's see who has decided to join this rogues gallery to come upon in commentary. Samantha, would you care to go first?
Hello there. I am Samantha Bryant. I am best known for writing the Menopausal Superheroes series. Well, in my writing life. In real life, I'm best known for that banana bread I make. And I am an old movie buff. You can find me most Fridays at the Carolina Theater enjoying their wonderful retro film series. I'm sponsoring The African Queen on June 9th. I'm very excited about that. And my celebrity crushes are Barbara Stanwyck and Humphrey Bogart.
Kelley.
Hi, I'm Kelley Frank. I also am Morbid Smile Art. I used to teach college English and used to teach film studies. So I feel pretty at home in this little group. I also love classic horror movies just in general, but also classic film. And I would say my celebrity crush is Vincent Price all the way. I love everything Vincent Price.
Jess?
I'm Jessica Nettles. I'm the author of Children of Menlo Park. I also write Southern Gothic horror. I'm a classic film buff and probably have been most of my life. I cut my teeth watching Vincent Price films on Saturday afternoons. I still love them. Big Svengoolie fan. And my celebrity crushes are Vincent Price and also Cary Grant, who is the most beautiful man I think I've ever seen.
Fraser?
My name's Fraser Sherman. I write historical fantasy, and I've written 5 film reference books. So obviously, I'm very much into film. I think I first started watching old films with Universal Films, were in syndication daily when I was a kid, and they were playing just as I got home from middle school, and many other films since then. Celebrity crush, speaking for the pre-1969, which is the period we're looking at, definitely Barbara Stanwyck. She is just awesome.
Carole?
Hi, I'm Carole Stokes. I'm a supernatural fanfic writer and the co-host of the Spotify podcast, So Get This, The Lore of Supernatural Fanfic. I grew up watching old black and white movies and classic movies without even knowing they were classic movies. They were just movies I would watch on the weekends with my mom. And I adore them. And I guess my celebrity crush is I'll go along with the pack. I'll say Vincent Price and Cary Grant.
Greg?
I am Greg Uchrin, and I've been a fan of horror movies ever since Horror of Dracula's coming attractions scared the bejesus out of me when I was 8 or 9 years old. I forget exactly how old I was. I started watching horror movies and Hitchcock movies soon after that, and I am a former political cartoonist. I am now doing freelance illustrating and working on a ghostly graphic novel. And my celebrity crushes, let me see. Right now, I've been watching Barbara Steele movies and old Bela Lugosi movies. So there you go.
Yeah, and I mean, much like everybody here, I kind of grew up on all the good old classic black and white movies, right? If it was a Universal monster movie, I mean, still Creature from the Black Lagoon, all 3 of those films are still some of my favorites. I was fortunate enough to get to meet Rico Browning a number of times. I've actually dove in those waters where they filmed all the underwater scenes. So I'm a huge fan of those films, and I would have to say Ingrid Bergman is one of my big. I was always in love with her. What can you say when you got her and Bogart? I mean, what more do you need in life? And probably
it's too bad you can't see this other corner of my room because I have a painting of the Gill Man and a signed poster from Creatures signed by Rico.
Oh, cool.
I'm so jealous.
So, and unfortunately, he just recently passed. I thought I was going to get to see him again, and but so let's talk a little bit about what your favorite film is. What's something that you really just sort of cements this entire genre for you? And I recognize that that's like asking, who's your favorite child? What's your greatest influence in life? And because I'm the moderator, and because I'm a sick and twisted individual, I'm going to say you get to pick one, Samantha.
Okay, so you'll get a different answer every time you ask me, but this time I'll say Rebecca. Daphne du Maurier's novel, as done by Alfred Hitchcock and with Olivia de Havilland and, oh goodness, who's my man in that one? Who plays De Winter? Anybody remember?
Laurence Olivier.
Thank you. It's like the only, I'm not a Laurence Olivier fan, but I liked him.
He's good in that.
Yeah, but for me, I think it's about the most of these movies really benefit from the fact that they're in black and white. That makes all the difference in how they look, all the light and shadow, and it's amazing in that film. And Mrs. Danvers is may actually be my favorite character in the film. If it's hard to imagine that it's possible, but I think she's scarier in the film than she was in the book. Yeah. So I'll go with Rebecca.
Kelley?
This is like, it really is choosing between your children. But if I have to choose, one that I've had like on heavy rotation lately is probably The Mummy, the Boris Karloff. There's something about his performance, and there's so many good scenes in that just stick with you. And I just have it just playing a lot lately, and it's just kind of in my consciousness right now. I love that movie.
Yes.
I'm going to continue the Karloff love and say The Black Cat, which is just it's so much fun because you've got Karloff, you've got Lugosi, and they're playing kind of opposite to what they normally play, because usually Karloff tends to play characters that are more good than evil, and Lugosi tends to play the heavies, and in this one it's flipped, and Karloff is off the chain, and he's out of his mind, and they're in this incredible house. It's like Art Deco gone wild. It's so gorgeous. And I can sit and watch that, and I am totally captivated. And Karloff is just so worth watching in this movie. And of course, it's black and white, but it's gorgeous. It's just a gorgeous movie.
Fraser?
I will go with North by Northwest by Hitchcock. Beautifully made film, great to look at, entertaining, carries over a lot of essential Hitchcock ideas. Innocent man framed, forced to go on the run. A MacGuffin, which ultimately isn't an important thing that everyone is chasing, that ultimately isn't important to the plot, except it gets it in motion. Two people who are a little bit feckless and irresponsible, and they fall in love, and that forces them to level up. And it's just a wonderful film.
Carole?
Well, I do adore Rebecca, so that was a great choice. I'm going to go with Notorious. I simply love Notorious. You got Cary Grant, Ingrid Bergman, so there's like half our crush list right there. They love each other. They each other. The tension is so wonderful between them. And then you have Claude Rains as this horrible Nazi party member, sympathizer. And Ingrid has to go in and do this terrible job where she has to spy and marry him and all of this. And the romance is fantastic. The suspense is fantastic. So many times you're like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? All the scene in the wine cellar, all of it is just so beautifully done. And it just, the sets and the costumes are gorgeous. And I can watch that movie anytime it's on, and I'm delighted.
Greg?
Well, I'm going to be a little bit obscure. My favorite one is Return of the Vampire with Bela Lugosi. It was made during the war, and amazingly enough, we have a female Van Helsing character. And Bela Lugosi plays a vampire who is so evil that he attacks a 7-year-old girl.
Wow.
This is evil. This is completely evil. He makes Dracula look nice. So, and it also has a score by Mario Castelnuovo Tedesco, but who is taught most of the second generation of film composers like John Williams and Jerry Goldsmith. So it's a nice little movie that I want to recommend to people.
So let's actually start with kind of the master himself, the one and only Alfred Hitchcock. You know, if I turn sideways, maybe I can get the jowl going enough to do my bad imitation, but I'm not going to do that. So when we look at Hitchcock and we look at the collection of films, TV, anthology shows, and we can look at so much of his work and then see that influence come downstream into things like The Twilight Zone, The Outer Limits, all of that much greater sort of a look and challenge at the nature of people, right? Because that's a lot of Hitchcock, you know, when we look at this. I mean, one of my favorite stories is still Vertigo, to go watch the film Vertigo, because that was one of those that was maybe not necessarily, I mean, even though it's known, it was not necessarily one of the bigger successes at the time, right? So when we look at Hitchcock and, you know, a time that spanned, again, more than 50 years, what kind of were the big influences for you with Hitchcock? You know, because again, we see a lot of different phases and shifts throughout his career and what kind of stories he wanted to tell, his influences, and we can see that reflected as what the culture was at the time as well. And I think this is a lot of what we still get to see. So Kelley, for you, you know, what of Hitchcock's work for you really was something you look at and you're like, okay, yes, this is the film for me that is that quintessential Hitchcock?
See, it's tough because there's so many. I mean, I agree with you. Vertigo is right up there. That one is so surreal and interesting, and Psycho is also really good for me. But I think I really just have to choose The Birds, because there is something about that that's just it's like one of these like early disaster films like we have so many of now, but it also is like an ecological statement, and there's like the whole town turning against people and the outsider and people desperately trying to escape, and you know, are these birds good and are these birds bad and all of this, and I don't know. And there's something about Tippi Hedren's performance that's also just very elegant and just, I don't know, she's just really good in that performance, and I wish she and Hitchcock hadn't had that, you know, the classic falling out, to put it mildly, because I would have loved to have seen her in more of those types of films. But I mean, everything down to her the tailoring and just everything is just so well shot and just like lovingly put together in that film, and I love it.
I'm going to throw a question at you since you brought that up. We can kind of make parallels between Hitchcock and Tippi in that film, like Shelley Duvall with Shining, right?
Oh, yeah.
Because
definitely.
Hitchcock pushed her to the breaking limit. We saw this as something that affected her long after. Do you think the performance we got is part of the nature of she actually was going through that level of trauma as a part of the filming and the pressure and all the different things that we've learned over the years about how that was shot?
So it's kind of a difficult question because we know how the movie turned out now. And so we know that it was, you know, you could argue that it was, you know, for a good cause, but it's also like if the movie had been bad, would it still have been for a good cause? And so, yeah, I'm on the fence about that. because I do kind of feel like, on the one hand, the finished product, the finished art piece, there's this whole notion of like suffering for your art and all that kind of thing. But it's also like, yeah, I don't think it was, I think that she could have pulled that out if he just approached her a little bit, like a decent, and I think part of that was his own sexism, more than anything else. And I think it comes down to that with Kubrick as well. There's a difference between like pushing someone to do better, like a coach, and pushing someone because you see them as a prop in your film. You know what I mean? So
Oh yeah.
I don't know. I love Hitchcock. I will defend Hitchcock on it on so many things, but I won't defend him on that.
So Jess, what about you? What's your Hitchcock film?
Oh Lord, my favorite is Rope from 1948,
Mhm.
and I like it because it's contained.
Mhm.
And you've got that beautiful long shot, but mostly because it's a contained thriller. Everything happens in that apartment, and the pressure that builds from the moment we start and we realize what's happened with the body that we never get to see. And I love containment horror. I write space horror because I like containment horror. I like enclosed spaces and things to be happening in that enclosed space. So I love exploring that, and I guess it comes from maybe seeing this film. I don't know, or maybe something. But I remember the first time I saw Rope, and I was just captivated. And every time I watch it, it never fails to grab me and hold me the entire time I'm watching it. It's just, and I know the lines almost by heart because I've watched it so many times, and I know what's going to happen, and I'll still watch it, and I'm still horrified. And it's just beautiful. I mean, just once again, the setting's beautiful. The costuming, of course, is immaculate because he's always such a stickler for let's make this beautiful and aesthetic. So you've got that New York aesthetic, and you've got the apartment that's gorgeous, and in the middle of all this beauty is this dead body and this murder and this horror that's happened right underneath, the hors d'oeuvres. And I love that. I just love that.
Mhm.
Well, it's hard to keep the shrimp fresh.
Absolutely.
Fraser, how about you? What's your Hitchcock?
Okay, having gone with North by Northwest on the previous question, this time I'll go with Rear Window. It's a wonderful film. Jimmy Stewart and Grace Kelly in a very intense, sexy relationship. These strange goings on. For anyone who doesn't know, Jimmy Stewart has been laid up in his apartment with a bum leg. He starts getting in. All he can do is sit and watch the courtyard of the apartment complex he lives in. And so he starts watching the neighbors in their windows, seeing their lives. And so we get multiple little mini dramas in addition to the main plot, which is Stewart trying to prove that Raymond Burr, one of the neighbors, has murdered his wife. And it is beautifully done. It also has Thelma Ritter as a supporting character, and she is just awesome in everything. So that would also be my favorite Hitchcock. And I have that one on DVD because it's just that good.
Carole?
He's, once again, it's always so hard to choose because, there are so many to choose from. I'm going to go with one of his lesser known ones, Shadow of a Doubt. Just love Shadow of a Doubt. And it's one of the earlier movies in which he explores a theme that we see often in his movies, which is nobody believes the main character. The main character learns something or knows something, but nobody will listen to them and nobody will believe them. We see it North by Northwest, and even Rebecca and stuff, where nobody believes that this weird stuff is happening to this woman. And so here it is. Teresa Wright is the young woman, and her mother's brother, I believe is who it is Joseph Cotton, who does a fantastic job. Everyone's so happy to see him. He's very genial, but she quickly has doubts about him and is trying to find out about him. Of course, nobody will listen to her. She's just, you know, she's still kind of just a kid. And it really is tense to the very end. Of course, she's right. But that whole disbelief in how you can be in this ordinary world but have this extraordinary thing happening and be alone in it, be the only one who sees it, knows it, believes it, is just really, really creepy.
Greg?
Oh, well, of course I can't channel surf and come across Psycho, North by Northwest, or Vertigo, because I will stop and I will watch the whole thing. But I'm going to make another odd recommendation: Foreign Correspondent. And the reason I like that is George Sanders. You know that he's playing a journalist who never takes notes, who never interviews anyone, and you know that he's really a spy for MI5 at that point in time. And he's just really funny and wonderful. And I just love that movie because of his character.
Samantha?
Sorry, I have my screens reversed and I couldn't find my mute button. The thing I love in Hitchcock movies in general is that theme he's got going of people being out of their depth, right? People stumble into something that they are not equipped to deal with, had no reason to expect, and then they have to deal with it. And I think that's at the heart of a lot of my favorites of his. Carole, I was actually going to pick Shadow of a Doubt, so I'm like, okay, got to pick something else now.
Clearly, you and I are on the same track here tonight.
Yeah. So I'm going to go with Suspicion, which has a similar theme, in that you're at different moments in the film, you're like, well, that's kind of ambiguous. Is it threatening? Is it innocent? I can't tell. And then especially since you've got Cary Grant in that one, and he's just, wow. I mean, it's just not fair that he was so handsome and could be so funny and could be so threatening. And, it's completely unfair. I'm surprised Hollywood let him last, because he could just do everything. You don't even need any other actors. But yeah, that ambiguity and that I'm going back and forth while I'm watching it, trying to decide if he is or is not nefarious, is excellent.
So when we look at all kind of the themes that Hitchcock played with, I mean, there definitely is a through line of some consistent themes that even as we talk about these different movies and films, they're all pretty much very personal, right? When you get that feeling where you really are going on a ride with the narrator. Whoever's eyes you have to be seeing it through at that point in time, you're feeling and living that story, right? And I mean, we've got practical effects at the time. Obviously there was no CGI or anything like this. Because of black and white, you do get to do so much with shadow and light and depth in a way that you can't do with color film, right? Because color gives away a lot of depth and detail. If we look at something like Psycho, I firmly believe that had Psycho been shot in color, it would not have had the same kind of an impact. Even just the shower scene alone, seeing something dark running through, you knew what it was, but that black and white just really ratcheted it up. So, and I'm going to just kind of throw this out there for everybody to see what you think. When we look at Hitchcock and those influences and how those influences carry through to storytelling today, what's kind of the big through line for you that maybe has been an influence for you?
I'm not sure what you're asking.
Well, so when we look at especially Greg, because you're just political cartoons.
Right.
Obviously everything is a political cartoon.
Yes.
But I mean, when we look at the work of Hitchcock, we look at his style of storytelling. When you look at that style of narrative, and we look at how he develops character, right? When we get to connect with the person we're going on the ride with, I think that that's something we all get that connection with, is how we create that connection. That's the reason that I think that we feel that, we feel that final punch at the end of Psycho where we go and see I've turned into mother and this. Yeah, Jess.
I think something that really comes through to me over and over again is how well he does unreliable narrator, where you think you can trust this character that you're connecting with, and then that character does something that sort of is almost a betrayal to the viewer, where you're like, like Suspicion. You're like, do I trust this dude? But this also happens, with Psycho, where you're not really sure if you can actually trust um, the woman who ends up getting stabbed, or you end up not trusting certain people in the birds, and you're like, okay, so who can I trust? And he plays with trust an awful lot, and he games the viewers. He also games other characters. And so you're ending up with this whole thing of who do I trust? And I think unreliable narrator is something, I like playing with it, definitely.
I can't say it's something that I play with myself, but one of his biggest personal issues, supposedly his father took him down to a police station when he was a kid and had him locked away just to kind of warn him to stay on the right side of the tracks. And from that point on, he was terrified of the law. And that's reflected in all the countless films where the guy is falsely accused and nobody will listen. The Wrong Man, which is not one of his better known films, Henry Fonda is misidentified as a crook, and the police, doing what by today's standards are horribly sloppy work, just make it worse, and he winds up looking more and more guilty. And he's an average guy, and he has no lawyer, and he has no idea how he is going to get out of this. And it's absolutely nightmarish and in black and white. And that kind of stuff is powerful, and was powerful for Hitchcock. Its power comes through in the movies too.
Yeah,
I was going to jump in on what Jessica was saying about trust. I think that's something that I've always been struck by in his work as well, and in particular about how trust is betrayed. Like, you think you know somebody, you think you know what you're in for, and then there's this twist, and that doubt, and especially in the ones with really great ambiguity where you're not sure if your doubt is warranted or if you're just being paranoid. It's something he plays on really, really well, and it's definitely something that I play with when I'm writing horror. A lot of times, it's right there in the person you trust is the scary thing, is the evil and the betrayal.
I think one of the really striking unreliable narrators would be Spellbound, where you have the amnesiac Gregory Peck, and even he doesn't know who he is. So he's terribly unreliable because he doesn't know anything. And so everything we learn, we're learning along with him. He's learning along with us. And so it really is difficult to know what's happening and how he got there and so on. I do enjoy an unreliable narrator. I think it's a great avenue to kind of explore a different way to have a story go. I think one of the things that draws us in so quickly into a Hitchcock story is he has things start off so normally. We're walking down the sidewalk after work with our newspaper under our arm and our briefcase in the hand, and everything's hunky-dory and we're going to have our 5 o'clock cocktail. But within the next couple of hours, the world has turned upside down, or there's sabotage going on, or there's mistaken identities or whatever. But he starts off on this really very recognizable every man, every woman kind of scenarios, and then just starts kind of skewing things And kind of before we even realize it, we're in a completely different place. And so there's that bewilderment of, what am I doing here? How did I get here? How do I get out of it?
Mhm.
You know.
And when we've been growing up, we've all been accused of something we didn't do,
Right.
and that allows us to identify with the major characters who are also the wrong man or the wrong woman. They're on the run. It's we all share in that betrayal by the authorities or by our parents.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think there's-
I hadn't seen Spellbound until relatively recently, and it was one of the picks at the Carolina, and I got to see it. And one thing that really struck me is like, wow, our idea of what's ethical in mental health treatment has changed.
yeah, definitely.
Right up there with the ethical police stuff. You know?
So let's actually shift gears. Let's change over to something even a little bit more fun. The idea of all the good old classic Marvel. Okay, I should be cut off for the day. The Universal movie monsters. There we go. I've been talking Marvel just a little bit too much lately. All of the good Universal movie monsters, all the classics, and those particular style of telling. We get the Lugosi's, the Karloffs. We get names that are now to us household and really invoke that idea of horror. But at the time, even for Universal, these really were kind of B movies. I mean, they were a little bit higher budget. They were pulling in and working a little bit harder. But when we look at that particular period of time, which one of the Universal movie monsters really does it for you? And so, Fraser, I'm going to start with you on that one since just you topped that last one.
I'll go with, there's lots of good choices. Boris Karloff in Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein. They're terrific movies, wildly over the top. They embody that universal aesthetic of dark shadows and huge towering buildings. And as plenty of reviews have pointed out, they seem to exist in a kind of ambiguous time period where there's contemporary clothes, and yet all the villagers are dressed in kind of old school peasant look. But, if nothing else, there is Karloff and his performance, and Colin Clive, and Elsa Lanchester, and Ernest Thesiger as Dr. Pretorius, and they're just wonderful, memorable movies. And I will throw in Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, because although Karloff is not in it, it is brilliant.
Carole, how about you?
Oh gosh, I loved all of them. I guess I'm going to have to go for the vampires and Bela Lugosi with the dashing. They had the cape and the accent and the castle and everything. So they were evil and scary, but they were kind of glamorous, and they would sweep the women away a little bit with the romance, and then it would be like, oh, ha, 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 time for a little snack. So I really did enjoy all of them, but yeah, I'll have to go for the vampires and their portrayers. Pretty much Bela Lugosi, right? I'm trying to think if there even was, before you get into the next era.
You had Lugosi, and you had I forget who hopped in for a couple of those films. I just went blank.
Lon Chaney.
Lon Chaney. Thank you.
Chaney.
Oh, Lon Chaney. Oh, I adore Lon Chaney. Yes, Man of a Thousand Faces. Yes, can't leave him out of that.
Greg, how about you?
Well, I spent about $500 on a new cape. So let's go for my second best, and we'll go for the Wolfman. First of all, the first movie has such a wonderful cast. Maria Usmanskaya, Bela Lugosi, Patrick Knowles, Ralph Bellamy, and it is so well put together that and then it goes on for at least four more movies, and well, six more if you add Abbott and Costello meets Frankenstein. It's a really interesting character, and it was played by the same man all the way through, Lon Chaney Jr.
Mm-hmm. Samantha?
Well, I think you already know that the Gilman is probably my personal favorite. I think the key to it is just that gorgeous scene in the water where she's swimming on top and he's swimming below, and it's kind of confusingly romantic and menacing at the same time. And, I was probably like 6 the first time I saw it, so that probably explains my whole romantic life. But but yeah, I have a special place for the Gilman. I got a box set of some of the big ones for Hanukkah last year, and so I sat down and did a watch of all of them again. And the one that struck me this time was The Invisible Man. It is hysterically funny. And I don't really think of these movies. I mean, they all might make you laugh here and there, but I don't think of them overall as being comedies. But The Invisible Man is as much comedy as it is horror, and the special effects hold up amazingly well. So if it's been a while since you've seen that one, it's worth another watch.
And the ones that are in 3D, because I mean, to see Creature from the Black Lagoon in 3D, we're in the little blue and red.
Yeah.
Yes, that is the way to see it. Kelley, what about you?
Well, you guys, I've already said I love The Mummy, and I'm gonna keep talking about Boris Karloff as the Mummy. There are some Lovecraftian moments in that. There are some moments of like indescribable horror. I think of the guard who's like looks over and sees the mummy walking out, and you just hear his mind just crack, and he just laughing. And there's all these like really great horror moments. But I think the film also has a lot to say about escaping and denying your own past, trying to move forward into the future and leave the ideas of the past behind, not to let our past catch up with us. And I feel like it has a very modernist approach to these past ideas were good at the time, but maybe we should be questioning, why we have that. We should try to move on and not let it slowly and inexorably creep up on us and drive us to madness or make us into something that maybe we were reincarnated from. So there's a lot of like undertones to it, and I think that the more I've had it on repeat a lot, and the more you watch it, the more you start to think like there's a lot that's being said about the particular time in which the film was made within this movie, and about the idea of rejecting the past and moving into the present. And I feel like it's a very relevant, interesting film to watch from that perspective.
Yes.
I'm with Samantha. I really love the Gilman, and probably always have. And once again, it's that whole beauty of seeing him swim, and you end up rooting for him. It's not like a lot of monster movies where you're like, oh, the monster is truly evil. This is a complicated matter because he's not the evil in the movie. The humans are. And so you end up rooting for him. You want him to get the girl. Every time I watch it, I root for him a little bit more. And I want him to just take down the scientist. I'm just like, just take those guys down. Get Julie Adams, go run off. You kids have fun and just kill these guys because they're worthless. They're all the men in that movie are worthless.
Yeah, they're all worthless to actively bad. There's no like, ooh, I guess he'll be okay. Yeah.
I guess her boyfriend, not even her boyfriend's any good. And yeah, it's an interesting, it's definitely a relic of its time in that in the way it portrays the girl, of course. Putting her in a white bathing suit in the Amazon. Really, guys? Really? Making
It
her a
was
scientist
Florida,
and then using none of her scientific knowledge. I mean, seriously. But yeah, it's still I watch it, I yell at it, I still love it. I still love it, and I still love the creature. And it's one of the most magnificent creature outfits I've ever seen. And I really didn't realize just how beautiful it was until I saw it at the Plaza Theater here in Atlanta, maybe about 3 or 4 years ago. I got a chance to see it on the big screen for the very first time. And I'm watching it, and while everybody else is probably enjoying the movie, I'm looking at the costume going, holy cow, look how beautiful it is. Look at that. Oh my God. It's gorgeous. It's a gorgeous costume.
Did you read Lady from the
Yes.
Black Lagoon?
Yes.
Yeah, about Mildred. I can't remember her
I
last
can't
name.
remember her last name, but
the woman who created it.
The woman who created it. And I think I read it about the same time that I went to see it on the big screen. And so I'm like, she did, I'm tearing up because it's just so beautiful, the crafting that went into that. Amazing for the time period. And it still holds up. No matter how many times I watch it, it still holds up.
So looking at all of the spanning, because again, when we look at the Universal, what's considered in canon for all the movie monsters, right? We have some that took themselves very, very seriously, like the early Dracula movies, the early, Wolfman, Frankenstein, Invisible Man. These were definitely meant to be on the edge. And then as we moved, into the 50s, 60s, we got into a lot of the ones that sort of made fun of themselves, Abbott and Costello, Three Stooges, and when we start getting into some of the ones of, the Bride of Frankenstein's cousin comes over to the house for spare parts. Yeah, no, that wasn't one, but I really think it should have been in about 1965. What to you is that legacy of the Universal monsters today? Because again, we've seen Universal try to reboot and fail miserably. But I mean, if we look back at the Brendan Fraser, mummy movies, you could definitely say that was an homage back to the Universal movie monsters. Mm-hmm. Had what we saw come out with, well, the movie that shall not be named, but had we seen that kind of a take, I think we would have had a lot of fun with, say, the Wolfman or that kind of a reboot of Creature from the Black Lagoon. So what do you think that the legacy is of all the Universal movie monsters?
I think
Carole?
it's
go
the
ahead.
empathy for the monster.
Yeah.
Yeah, the empathy for the monster. Like in nearly all of them that I consider good, like the ones that stick in my heart are the ones where the supposed monster is not really the monster of the film. We feel for them, we're cheering for them, we wish they could have a happy ending, and it feels tragic when they don't, instead of like yay, the good guys won at the end. Like at the end of Frankenstein, when we think the monster is dead, of course, there's a sequel, so I guess not. But we think he's dead, and I'm like, ah. It felt like, that if everybody was just a little bit better than they were, that it could have had a completely different ending. And I think that's the pull of them for me.
I think in the original rounds of movies, and that what we move away from as the iterations go on and comedy begins to make its presence known, they're really tragic figures. They're trapped in whether it's the fact that their being is unable to be reconciled with modern life, like the Creature from the Black Lagoon, or they're trapped by their hereditary and genetics, like the Wolfman. They're trapped by their the way they have to exist, like the vampires, and we do feel for them because they're tragic. There's no, they're never going to make it. There's no hope for them, and so we kind of root for them though, because as they might be, killing and maiming and stuff, but they're not doing it for the heck of it. They're doing it as a measure of survival. And that isn't usually understood by the people around them, of course, but we see it because we're watching them and we understand that they don't really have a choice. You can't tell the creature from the Black Lagoon, don't hurt the nice lady, because you may love her and think she's beautiful, but you're going to like squish her. and and so they yearn for things. They see things they want. They yearn for them. They yearn for a life, but they're trapped and can't ever get there. And so we hurt for them and we'll feel sad for them. Now, like as I said, the iterations go on and we move further and further away from that. And they become more amusing, or we're just like, we lose that empathy. We lose that feeling of sharing their journey, as unhappy as it may be. But in the early ones, that's part of the starkness, and that it just seems to go so well with the black and white, because it is a fairly stark existence for them, and it really highlights that just visually as we watch them try to escape their destiny.
I think speaking specifically of Frankenstein movies, I think the legacy is the James Whale, Boris Karloff films and their sequels. For millions of people, they've defined the creature as much as Mary Shelley did. His look, his manner, the way he moves, the way he speaks, if he speaks at all. And so much of that comes from the movie and not from the book. And the influence has been incredible.
It created a mythology, the early ones, that is whole. And to reboot them is sort of like trying to reboot the Bible. This is the original, and everything else is a copy.
Right.
Yeah.
I think the real legacy is the fact that, 80, 90 years on, we're still talking about them.
Mm-hmm.
We're still watching these films. We're still putting them up in the theater and saying, hey, let's pay some money and let's go eat popcorn and let's watch these guys that are dead. Let's go watch Elsa Lanchester go, scream and look fabulous. And let's introduce these people to a whole new generation and get them excited about it too, so they can keep telling the stories. Mm-hmm. And so they can get their own ideas and start telling more stories about them. And that's the real legacy, get these new people like us excited,
Yeah.
Lugosi does not sparkle.
No.
Yeah. And I think that the big thing is, like, when you were talking about homages, I think that's the future for a lot of it. Instead of trying to remake it, just be inspired by it. You can't remake it, but take that as an inspiration and move on. So I'm thinking of like The Shape of Water. That was clearly, obviously inspired by Creature from the Black Lagoon, but it's not claiming to be the Creature from the Black Lagoon. The Mummy movies. There's a lot of films that it doesn't have to be making fun of it like Monster Squad style. It can also be just inspired by and then building on that same kind of legacy. I read a lot of comics, and it has that same kind of feel to it, where it's a mythology that everyone's building on. So either you contribute to the mythology directly, or you get inspired by it and build your own mythology from it. But don't try to, fix something that's not broken. These films hold up just fine. So.
Well, let's kind of move outside of, kind of the big franchises, as it were, right? because there's a ton of other film that was done that was, we see a lot of influence, and so whether we go back to silent era, whether we're looking at, all the big black and white movies, the 3D, because I have a big love of a lot of the old 3D movies out of the 50s, sitting there in the black and, the red and green glasses, It Came from Outer Space, Creature from the Black Lagoon, a lot of these films that were told from that period of time, and they reflect the culture of the time. I mean, we look at like Them and Godzilla, the fears of war and all the way, that kind of fun stuff. So, Carole, what's something outside of these? What's one of the films that you remember from that period of time, or of that period of time, that you have great love for, and what is it about that film that kind of sets the period for you?
Oh gosh, this is such a juicy, Oh, I'm gonna go with, oh gosh, there's so many ways I could go. I'm gonna go with Roger Corman. Love me some Roger Corman movies, and I especially love his Poe movies. So let's go with The Pit and the Pendulum. Oh, man, you just gotta love the costumes and the terrible traps and puzzles and the Gothic castle. And, there had to be a love story in there. So you have the handsome, dashing stranger trying to save, the beautiful woman or whatever. It just, and just the right amount of cheese. So you could like sit there with your crackers and have your cheese and crackers. I really, really enjoyed those a lot. So The Pit and the Pendulum, I'll pick in particular, but all of those kinds of movies where there was always some tragic tale of history and it would repeat itself, or the monster that they hadn't seen was going to come forth. Oh, it just, and generally speaking, they weren't monsters. They were men. They were like psychological monsters. They were twisted people, which is, I won't say always more scary, but it's certainly a little easier to, we don't expect to see Frankenstein walking in our doorway, but evil people could be right around the corner. So, and they just had such panache. They were like bold and colorful and dramatic, and I ate it up with a spoon.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Greg, what's a movie that touched you?
Let me see. There's if you want something to define an era, the Atom Age, Godzilla. The one that we grew up with was the one with Raymond Burr. But that's actually cut from the Japanese original, and the Japanese original is really hard hitting on this H-bomb stuff. You shouldn't be doing this. It is wrong. You dropped a bomb on us. We understand that, but the H-bomb is terrible, and it brings out this monster that destroys things. And the monster is a symbol of the atomic age. Mm-hmm. So that's my recommendation here.
All right, Samantha.
As much as I love my kaiju and cheesy bad representations of Edgar Allan Poe's work, I'll go with a completely different track. A movie I love from the 50s is The Bad Seed. It's Patty McCormick.
Yeah.
And and similar to Spellbound, our ideas about psychology have evolved a little since then, but it's still such a powerful story. And having raised some children, I do believe that they are evil.
Having been a teacher, you believe they're evil.
Some more than others.
Yeah, well, not all the children I raised were mine. But yeah, there's just something about that evil child thing that continues to be one of my favorite tropes in all kinds of stories. I guess the thing that's supposed to be innocence and the thing that we're supposed to be protecting is the danger, is a really lovely twist that works for me every time.
Kelley?
So when I remember going to different like film showings on my old campus when I was a student, and they would show a lot of retro films. And one of the ones that I saw then was The Seventh Seal, the Bergman, and it just resonated with the subtitles. Like that, you can find it dubbed, but there's just some moments in there. There's some lines that just punch you in the gut. There's some moments that feel a little cheesy, a little that don't really age as well. But my God, there's some beautiful cinematography. It's just so good. It's one of those movies that when I like, when we're gonna have movie night with friends, I'm like, hey, have you seen The Seventh Seal? And they're like, oh, is it that horror movie? Like, I'm like, no, 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 no. Okay, let's sit down and watch this. And then afterwards, they're like, God, why did you do that to me? But it's a good movie, and I feel like it's one of those life-changing kind of films. And then you see references to it everywhere. It's one of those things that has like a lot of cultural significance that people don't realize what's being referenced. And I love that movie. I have a soft spot for that movie, and I rewatch it every year. It's just so good. So yeah.
Yes.
Carnival of Souls.
Ooh, that's a good one.
And it's black and white, and a lot of people think it's cheesy, but it just, I don't know, I'll sit down and watch it any old time. I've even seen it in the theater, and once again at the Plaza, they ran it, and my friend Daryl and I went, and it's just disturbing. It's the kind of horror I like. I like to be disturbed like that. And it's one of those things where you come to the end of it and you go, what just happened here?
Mm-hmm.
And it's not that it's confusing. It's in a bad way. It's more like, where am I? What the heck? What just happened? For those not familiar, it's the story of a church organist who goes to a new job and has a car accident on the way, and then things get crazy. And you're not sure, once again, there's that whole unreliable, questionable narration going on. So you don't know if what she's experiencing is completely real, or if she's going through a psychotic break, or what's going on. And it's just disturbing. And because it's in black and white, it just ratchets up that whole imbalanced feeling. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful film.
That Abandoned Pavilion is on my list of abandoned places I totally want to go urban explore sometime.
Totally want to go see that.
Oh yeah,
totally want to.
I believe the head ghoul in that movie was actually the producer.
I think you're right. Right.
Yeah, and because
such an eerie, unsettling movie. I love that movie so much.
Oh, me too. Just the best.
Yeah, I discovered that one because I bought a box set of 4 movies from that period of time. I'm like, I've always heard of this movie, but I've never seen it.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, okay, I got to sit down and watch this. And I think it was a Friday night after traveling. I was like, threw it in. All right, great. Let's see. And I'm like, what the hell did I just watch?
Yeah, my experience was similar to that. And I was like, oh, there's a carnival in it. No.
Yeah. I caught it on TCM.
It's not that kind of carnival.
Yeah, I caught it on TCM, and I think the first time I saw it, I caught it about halfway through, and I went, what the hell is this? And then I caught the end of it, and Ben Mankiewicz kind of explained it a little bit, and I'm like, okay, so the next time I'm able to find it, I'm going to watch it all the way through, because this is my kind of crazy. And then I got to see it again, and I watched it all the way through and went, this is beyond amazing. So anytime, if it's on television, or if I find it somewhere, or if it's playing in a theater and I can get to it, I go watch it because it never fails to get under my skin, and it'll bug me for several days. And it's actually like pieces of it have shown up in my writing before. It's just that amazing.
I sort of grew up with it because it was on Chiller Theater, so I was watching it from about 12 years old, and it warped me.
That explains a lot.
Yeah.
Best kind of movies.
Fraser, how about you? What's the film you remember?
I'll go with, again, Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. It is a I've enjoyed it when I was a kid, one of the syndicated ones. I watched it as an adult and appreciated how well done it is. The plot involves Dracula is going to place, I can never remember which one is which, Lou's brain inside the monster so you have a nice, stupid, pliable servant. Of course, Lou and Bud have some objections to that. But the thing that makes it work, the monsters play it absolutely straight. The mad scientist plays it straight. Abbott and Costello are doing their normal comedy routines. It's like they had wandered into a Universal horror set and they're doing their thing. The monsters are doing their thing. And that just makes it a perfect mashup. It's wonderful.
And I love the comic timing of Bela Lugosi in that one.
Yes.
So
I'm pretty sure that's actually where I met most of the Universal monsters. Like, I think I saw that first, and then I reacted so favorably that my mom showed me a lot of, what they were working off of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Saw it in 4th grade.
So, kind of coming in and looking to wrap up, because we've covered just touching just a little bit of an era of film that I think that anybody who hasn't watched movies from that era is going to lose so much in what you're watching now, right? Because so much of what we see is reimagining, retelling the influence of the stuff that's come before. We talk about that. We talk about the things that we've written and that have influenced us. Greg, I'm going to start with you on this one. How has the film, the storytelling, everything from that era influenced you, your work, all that, just kind of in general, helping to mold and warp young minds? So,
it's influenced everything that I've done. I drew the monsters in my political cartoons. I am doing a graphic novel of a ghost story. Everything. I am obsessed with horror movies. That's how it affected me, and I tend to see that in reality as well.
Samantha?
I'd say they gave me a taste for complicated people and awesome hats.
Kelley?
Gosh, I'd probably say, like, there's a scene in The Fall of the House of Usher, with Vincent Price in it, where he's going into a room and they're looking at all these expressionist paintings, and he's just like, this family timber was crazy and all these things. And I was just like, man, I'd love to have a room full of weird paintings of family members I can point at and creep people out. And I credit that with why I became an artist, honestly. So thanks, Vincent Price.
Jess?
I think they made me curious about exploring horror. And I've kind of poked at it since maybe I was about 11 or 12, and just poking it, maybe writing it, and poking it, reading it, and exploring it. And then, I grow up and suddenly I'm doing things like turning my brother into a sort of Frankenstein monster in my stories, or, writing about the Gill Man in some way, and these stories just keep cropping up. So doing my own homages, so it keeps coming back. They don't go away. they're always there, creeping around.
Fraser?
I have my use of them tends to be quite specific. Atoms for Peace, which is a book I put out a few years ago. It's set in a world where mad scientist films and kaiju movies actually happen, and so the government has a special agency to deal with that back in the 1950s. And a short story, End of the World on the cutting room floor. The world has ended. The afterlife is mostly composed of old movies, and the producer is one of the few people who knows it. That came out in Space and Time a few years back. And beyond that, I use movie, since I do a lot of historical fantasy. If it's 20th century, people will make movie references as a way of indicating the period, much more so than probably most other forms of pop culture.
So I saved the worst for last. One of the things that we saw a lot come out, and somebody else who had a long spanning and frequently questionable career, was that of Ed Wood, right? And kind of the quintessential movie if you've ever seen in Ed Wood is Plan 9. You've either seen Plan 9 from outer space, you've run from Plan 9 from outer space, but part of the reason I bring him up, because, again, he was largely forgotten for a long time until, of course, he got revived with the film. But one of the things I think that it's worth bringing him up is because Bela Lugosi, so much of his legacy was just as tied to a number of the films of Ed Wood as it was in his later career, as it was to some of the old monster films and things like this. And I think this is one of those things of looking at somebody who did the quintessential, I have no budget, I have something akin to a story, and I'm going to tell a story come hell and high water of some way, shape, or form. I just want to throw it out there for if anybody has any commentary on Ed Wood, Plan 9, or the such.
Plan 9, Bride of the Monster were also on that same Chiller Theater playlist, and so I saw them both. They were both Ed Wood movies. I saw them both too many times, and actually, I thought they were pretty good. I think that Night of the Living Dead is a remake of Plan 9 from Outer Space, and it's done by someone who had a little bit more talent. But Ed, he was a friend of Bela Lugosi when Bela Lugosi really needed one, and I will always respect him for that.
One of the things I noticed, I rewatched Plan 9 for my last movie book, The Aliens Are Here, and one of the things I noticed, that and a much more obscure film called Invasion of the Saucermen are the first films to really suggest that there is a massive government cover-up of what the UFOs are doing. And of course, in Plan 9, it's expressed in typical Ed Wood language. It was a town. A small town, yes, but a town full of people. And it was destroyed, and the government covered it all up. And so now, whenever they read about a landslide or a fire or a flash flood, they wonder.
All right. Well, on that note, I think we will pull the curtain. But before we do so, let's make sure everybody knows where to find you guys, website, social media, and of course, if you have that book that needs to be pushed. Samantha, you're up first.
So hello again, and I'm Samantha Bryant. I hope that you will check out my menopausal superhero series or some of my short horror stories. You can find my website as my name, because I'm just boring that way, SamanthaBryant.com. Or if you Google me, just put the word author and you'll get me. If you just put Samantha Bryant, you're going to get an actress, and she's lovely, but I very rarely wear high heels and ball gowns.
Kelley?
You can find me if you just Google Morbid Smile Art or type in morbidsmile.com. You can find all my appearances, what cons I'll be at. You can find my writing, links to my artwork, and all that kind of stuff. I go to a lot of conventions. I have an Etsy shop, and I write a lot of spooky stuff. So, yeah.
Jess?
You can find me at jessicanettlesauthor.com. You can find me on most of the social media, Steampunk English. Let's see. I've written Children of Menlo Park, which is my novel. I'm also currently in Lonely Hollows, which is a folk horror anthology. I'm really excited about that. Me and 14 other authors wrote some really cool folk horror. It's on Amazon right now. Y'all go out and buy it because it's really awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Fraser?
You can find me online at frasersherman.com. That's FRASER. And my books are on Amazon. I'm also on Twitter and Facebook. My most recent publications, The Aliens Are Here, which I mentioned earlier, about movies and TV about aliens visiting Earth. Questionable Minds, which is a steampunk novel, came out last year. And I had a short Lovecraftian humor story in LOL Craft, which came out a couple of months back.
Carole?
I'm on Facebook, specifically on a lot of ConTinual panels. I'm on Twitter as true_firesign10. All my fanfic is on AO3 under firesign10. And under the name Ellis Colton, I'll be publishing my first romance book later this year.
Greg?
Well, I'm Gregory Uchrin, and you can find most my new stuff I put on my Facebook page, which is facebook.com/IV caffeine for intravenous caffeine, which is the name of my art studio. And if you do an image search on Gregorius U, all one word, you will see a lot of my old cartoons, including several really bad ones.
And I'm Jim Nettles. I've had the pleasure of being your host. Since we're talking film tonight, I'm in the recently released fairy films, We Folk on the Big Screen, which has a dozen of us writing about fairy folklore and the influence on film. And you can find me at jamesbnettles.com, authoressentials.net, authoressentialsworkshops.com, the Speculative Fiction Academy.com, creatingprose.com, and here at ConTinual, because I never have time to leave this chair or go watch anything on the film. We will see all of you again soon, and it is time to pull that red curtain aside. Everybody have a lovely evening, and make sure to throw away those popcorn boxes.